Charlie, thank you for your time. It's great to have the opportunity to speak to a club owner, especially as we are approaching the end of Global Football Partners' first season in charge at Charlton. What have you learned in that time?
Oh, crikey, Charlotte. I mean, just a huge amount. Past experience has taught me you need to take some time to look under the bonnet of a club when you come in. Every club's different. Every club has its strengths and weaknesses. Every club has areas that you start to really understand could be potentially an area for growth and other areas which could be a potential challenge. And I think it was just really important for those of us amongst the ownership group to take a step back, let the executives get on with running the club and have a proper look and see what we felt the future for Charlton under our ownership would look like.
Back in July, you said that you felt it would take around 3 years to fix the position you found the club was in. Is that still your belief today? And how much progress do you feel has been made in the time that you've been here?
Yeah, I think so. I think 3 years is a realistic time frame to sort of not just put in place the things that need to be put in place, but also to start to tweak some of those things as you see the outcomes going forward. Some of the programs that one puts in place in year one won't necessarily see the full outcomes until year three. And I feel that, year one, which has had significant ups and downs, both on the pitch but also away from the pitch, is overall been a solid step in that sort of direction in terms of 3 years. I mean, don't get me wrong, when we say 3 years, we don't mean it's going to take 3 years for us to improve. No, that's 3 years for the full programme of things that we're doing to come to fruition and to end up in a place where supporters and others can look at the club and say, OK, they really have made a significant step forward.
You said it there, this season has had plenty of ups, plenty of downs. Football is perhaps the least predictable sport there is. In your first year of ownership, how has the season unfolded in comparison to what you'd envisaged and certainly what you'd planned? Well,
I think looking from above, as it were, not being involved in the day-to-day of the football side, it's been a season of 4 quarters. The first quarter was the bit of pre-season that we came into right at the end, plus the first 5 or 6 or 7 games under the manager that was there when we came in, Dean Holden. Then there was the second quarter, which was the first quarter under Michael Appleson's charge, so to speak. Then there was the third quarter, which was the bit leading up to Michael's departure. And then there's been the fourth quarter, which has been the bit that Nathan's been in charge of. And effectively what you've seen is a very weak end to pre-season and start to the season, followed by a very strong second quarter, followed by a very weak third quarter, followed by a very strong fourth quarter. And I think what's been interesting is listening to people on the footballing side of the business as to why they believe those separate quarters developed as they did, and coming up with rational analysis as to how to improve overall throughout the entire footballing operation of the club in time for next year. Clearly, we came in at a deeply inopportune moment. There's no other way around to put it. Coming in 10 days before the start of a new season is just really not a great place to be, because on the one hand, there's not a vast amount that you can do, at least not in ideal terms, to really affect it in the way in which you'd want to be able to affect it. But on the other hand, there's an expectation that you will, right? So if you were to come in October, people would understand that you've come in and things are as they are. But of course, when you come in and the transfer window is still open, there is an expectation that you will be able to transform things more or less overnight from a standing start. And whilst, of course, one is hopeful that that would be the case, I don't think I would be honest in saying that I'm entirely surprised that it wasn't entirely the case.
Do you feel then that the January transfer window was the most opportune moment for you as a new ownership group to impose your business sense on the football club?
Well, I wouldn't say impose our business sense on the football club. What happened was an honest analysis of where not just the squad, but the general footballing setup was. And that analysis was being performed during the first half of the season by our technical department. And then they came to the ownership in December, effectively with a request for more effectively unbudgeted funding, because they felt that the club really needed to take that forceful step forward at that point in order to prepare ourselves for the following season. Now, of course, what then happened subsequently almost slightly justified their thinking, which was the form then fell off a cliff into a trough, and it ended up being that rather than that, that extra funding going to sort of helping us from a comfortable position, effectively it helped us from an uncomfortable position. But I think along the sort of, the philosophy of sometimes you have to take 1 step back to take 2 steps forward, I kind of feel that in the end, looking back, that was something which in a way we might end up benefiting from. that decision to be more proactive in January than a club would normally be. I mean, there were a very significant number of signings made. I think in the end 9, which is highly unusual for January, and including in those 9 signings was a very substantial number of permanent signings, which again is somewhat unusual in the January window. But I think what we have seen, and certainly as an amateur observer I have seen, is that the permanent signings that were made in that January window are starting to look like they were really good, solid additions which were going to strengthen the squad for the future. And of course, the advantages of them having been here in February, March and April is that when they come back in for pre-season, no one's having a guess about what type of player they are. The manager knows what kind of player they are, and they know each other, and they've already started to be drilled in the way in which the manager wants to play. As I said, that's an observation from, from a sort of almost like from a punter perspective, but I think one that a lot of fans would recognise.
So on that note then, the June window coming up, what are the aims and aspirations to get out of that period?
Well, I mean, to a degree at least, that's not sort of for me to say. Our aspiration as an ownership group is to see the squad improve, on a regular basis, constant basis, whether that be through recruitment or whether that be through coaching or whether that be through improved fitness levels. We want to see the team improve, just like every Charlton fan. But of course, the technical department and the manager have come to us as an ownership group, telling us what they believe needs to be done to the team in the summer in order to engender what we all want next season, which is a big promotion push. And we had meetings on that last week with the ownership group, very productive meetings when the ownership were absolutely clear that they want to back the manager in his aspirations.
Can I ask, has there been anything that's taken you by surprise since being here? Well, I could hardly claim to have foretold that we were going to go sort of 2 months without winning a game of football. So that was definitely an unwelcome and unpleasant surprise. I think on the other side, on the positive side of the register, is as we got our head under the bonnet, realising just what a special club, what a special institution this is. Of course, we knew elements of it, but until you're on the inside, until you see the community trust and what it does, until you see and understand the academy and what it does, until you see and understand the potential of the fan base and the huge love and passion which the fan base has for their club, then, it is still a pleasant surprise to really find out about those things in detail and to sort of start the process of falling in love yourself with the institution, which is something that, speaking with the other owners, there's been a real gradual sort of coming of emotion in terms of, right, this is something that we are deeply, deeply emotionally invested in. And that's been a really pleasant process. What steps are being taken to put us in a position for a stronger campaign next season?
Well, I think there are certain things which have been happening over the course of the last season which have been proposed to us as an ownership group as being necessary things to enable Charlton to reach its potential on the pitch. These aren't things that we've dictated. These aren't things that we've said have to happen. These are things that professional football people have said to us. If we're going to get to where we all want to get to, we're going to need to improve in these areas. It's the unglamorous stuff that goes on behind the scenes to ensure that the footballers that the club does have are both available to play as often as possible, but are also, when they do play, fit and able to outrun the opposition. And I think the analysis that our technical guys did was really that over the previous few years, and maybe even going back quite a long way, Charlton's injury record wasn't as it ideally would be, and that even in terms of when the players were fit to play, they weren't always as fit as they might be to actually finish games. And I think that often happens when you go through a period of turbulence off the pitch, is that you see that some of these support departments end up getting a bit denuded because the pressure's always on to sign more players. That's where the financial pressure goes on to. And sometimes people slightly take that eye off the ball in terms of what's required to support that whole structure. The guys were running interviews for the position of a performance director back in September, October. Because the person they chose was in a very serious senior job at a very serious senior club who valued him and didn't want to let him go. They then forced him to work out his entire notice period. Meant that Will Abbott didn't join us until January. It meant then that the processes that he started to put in place are going to be of incremental benefit to the club over the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, until hopefully we get to the point where his last club, Brighton, are, where they're widely regarded as being the most durable, fittest, club in the country, who can absolutely outperform their potential because their players are so often fit and available to play.
The women's game is such an exciting part of the football pyramid. Lots of growth, lots of exciting plans moving forward. What are the plans here?
I think obviously our women's team, our women's first team has had broadly speaking, a successful season. You know, good run in the cup, but unlucky to go out when they did. Good run in the league, still got a possibility of being promoted, although perhaps it's a little bit less likely than it did a week or two ago, but let's see, we're still up and running, we're still in there. So in some ways, while we've been heavily involved in various areas of the club that have had some challenges, the women's first team is not really an area of the club that has had significant challenges. You know, with Louise McGing running it and Karen managing the first team, we've kind of kept an eye on it, said to them, if there's anything you want, come to us. And obviously, you know, been watching with keen interest. I think the women's professional game as a whole is at a very interesting inflection point. With clearly there's a lot of stuff happening in terms of the Women's Super League and the Championship hiving off, spinning off from the Football Association to become a sort of fully independent professional entity, just like the Premier League did all those decades ago. And where that goes commercially in terms of TV rights, in terms of commercial deals, in terms of cost controls, a lot of this stuff is still to be worked out. And we're watching with keen interest to see the direction in which that goes in, because we're in a very particular position. Let's be clear, you know, other League One clubs do not have professional women's teams, you know, and we are competing as a club against clubs who don't spend a lot of money on their academy, who don't spend a lot of money, if any money, on their women's teams, and yet Charlton is doing all these things. So simultaneously, we're hugely ambitious for our academy and our women's club. At the same time, we have to be honest and realistic. We are currently in League One, and we don't want to be doing anything which is, you know, foolhardy or rash, because everything we do needs to have a plan. It needs to have a plan towards sustainability. Nothing becomes sustainable overnight, but there needs to be a glide path towards sustainability. From next season, you know, the women's team who already play half their matches here at the Valley, you know, the hope and the belief is they'll be playing all their matches here at the Valley. That will help us to grow a higher match attendance, will help us to grow more of a hospitality business, will help us attract sponsors who want to really sponsor a team that's playing at a proper stadium, or a bigger stadium, let's say, rather than a non-league stadium. So there's an awful lot of excitement, an awful lot of things that need to be done, but there's also a lot of uncertainty. There is a lot of uncertainty in the women's professional game at the moment. I think a lot of us who are owning women's professional clubs are waiting to hear what the outcomes of these different conversations are before we can formulate our own plans, because at the moment a lot of it's up in the air.
Charlie, back in January we hosted a Q&A with members of the board, and I think Charlton supporters really enjoyed the chance to hear directly from the owners, from the directors. So I want to ask you to sort of summarise, what is the ownership's vision for the football club overall moving forwards?
Well, I think that is something which has, as we knew it would do, developed over the first 8 or 9 months that we've been here. We bought into the club as a club with potential. We bought into the club in the case of some of the owners from America because they really wanted to associate with a club that came from the London area, where they spend most of their time when they are in the UK. But once we got our head under the bonnet and once we started to get a real touch and feel for the club, I think we really understood that the extent to which it is rooted in its community is the golden thread that runs through the club and which engenders the huge passion that people have for this club. You've got a charitable trust that's the top charitable trust in the country. That's not something to be taken lightly. That's an enormous benefit that the club enjoys from having this fantastic organisation associated with it. You've got an academy that's in the top 10 academies in the country. That's an unbelievable thing for a League One club to have. Have to spend a lot of money on it, mind, but nonetheless, it is an unbelievable benefit for the club to have. So as we started to, as I said, look at these things in more detail, we started to understand how the whole thing could be knitted together. I think Paul Elliott's contribution in really guiding us through the local community, the community which he comes from himself. He grew up a few hundred yards from the stadium, obviously played for the club from a very, very young age and has been a supporter all his life. The tutelage that he and people on the community trust and people at the academy and people from the fan base and sponsors have been able to give us in terms of what really makes this club tick, I think has enabled us to start building out a strategy that is very Charlton. Rather than us coming along and saying, we've got a plan for a football club and Charlton's the football club, it's us coming along, being humble, listening to people inside Charlton, listening to other stakeholders around Charlton and developing a plan that we think can be successful based on Charlton's own strengths. And that's the crucial point.
Well, one of our greatest strengths over the years has been our academy. I wanted to ask you your thoughts on the academy and, again, the vision for that moving forwards.
I view academies as being the most wonderful sort of font of youthful hope and optimism that runs through a club that takes its academy seriously. It just gives you this real sense of meaning. It roots you in your local community, that players are coming through who come from your local community, and that gives you a real purpose. Otherwise, you're just watching a group of players play out there who ultimately are just paid to come and represent the Shield without actually necessarily having any particular connection to it. When it comes to Charlton in particular, clearly that's an ecosystem that's been developed over a very long period of time. I used to look at the academy rankings and wonder how Charlton did it, how they were able always to be so successful when really they were competing against, you know, major Premier League clubs. Gradually I've worked out why that is, and you know, it's not one thing, it's many, many different things. It's the powerful talent, local DNA talent that the club has access to. It's the academy recruitment that we have invested in further and brought extra people into, and it's the management and the organisation that Steve Avery's put together over a number of decades, which is extraordinarily durable, extraordinarily hard-working and extraordinarily committed. And really we've sought to invest further in that, both, as I said, in bringing in new coaches, adding to the academy recruitment side, but also with the tie-up with the Jamaican Academy Mount Pleasant, which promises in future years to bring us a broader number of players that the academy guys can choose from, because you can never have access to too many, you know, bright young talent. So our view is that the academy is the foundation of this club. It's its USP, it's its point of difference. This is the thing that makes Charlton football different, is the sheer number of players that it brings through, and not just brings through, but brings through into its first team rather than constantly loaning them out to other clubs, and that then go on to have amazing careers both at Charlton and elsewhere. We've had offers for numerous of our academy players since we've been here, and we've placed the football guys under absolutely no pressure to sell whatsoever. We want to see our players develop themselves here. But of course, as we all know, there does come a time when for certain players, for one reason or another, time has come to move on, and that doesn't matter whether you're, you know, Charlton or whether you're Cole Palmer moving on from Man City to Chelsea. That sometimes these things have to happen, but they should be done for the right reasons. It should be done for the right reasons. It should be done because it's the right thing for the player and it's the right thing for the club, not because there's a cash flow crisis on.
Moving away from matters on the pitch, I want to talk to you about growth off of the pitch, because it kind of goes hand in hand, doesn't it? If you get that growth off of the pitch right, it's going to support all the activity we see going on there behind you.
Well, it's circular, isn't it? I had this discussion with the manager the other day, you know, which is, you know, the better he does, the more the club grows off the pitch. The more the club grows off the pitch, more we're able to invest back into the footballing side of the club to enable, you know, the first team and the academy to grow, etc. So there is a circularity to it, and it's very hard to grow a football club whilst the men's first team is suffering, right? But at the same time, I think as people who come from the commercial side, as I do, it's not good enough to simply sit here and say, well, let's wait until the first team's winning every week and then we'll all be fine. Well, in which case, you know, the rest of us just shouldn't be involved at all. We should just effectively the first team manager becomes your marketing director as well, which is fine, but would obviously do the rest of us out of a job. So we've been working quite hard at really building the foundations for growth of the club off the pitch in line with what's happening on the pitch, so that when growth does come on the pitch, at the same time the club's in a position to really move forward together in this way. What does that look like? Well, obviously, you know, we've done our significant media partnership with Football Co, which we'll look to see building out during the closed season and into next season. The partnership with Mount Pleasant in Jamaica is not just a playing partnership, but it's also a partnership on the marketing side as well. And that feeds into I think a broader understanding of Charlton's brand. And over coming weeks and months, we'll be rolling out a new sort of brand look and feel through our social media and that kind of thing. And one of the main things we've got to do, Charlotte, is we've got to connect with our very local communities here in South East London, because, you know, we've got a fantastic fan base, many of whom's originally came, or their families originally came from South East London, but many of them now live, you know, a little bit geographically distant from the ground, and it's fantastic to have them, and we're very lucky to have them. But I think even they would want to see more people who live locally to the stadium come to matches, because ultimately it's in the interest of all of us that we grow this fan base. We need to grow this fan base. We've got a fantastic stadium here, and it needs to be full. And once the football side is doing really well, then we need to have done the work on the other side of the club to make sure that we've got the people who are interested enough and engaged enough with Charlton to actually want to come here.
Connection is so important, and this season we've hosted a couple of really brilliant events, the open training session that took place, and more recently our free family fun day. the sheer volume of people who turned up and the buzz around the place when we've hosted those events is just another indicator, isn't it, of the size and the reach of this football club.
And yeah, and the potential, you know. So there was a lot of hard work that the team did that went into the Family Fun Day. It might seem like a small thing to some people looking on, but it's not a small thing, organising a, you know, fairly large sort of, you know, open air event for people. And on equivalent previous iterations of that idea, they got 300 or 400 visitors. This year it was 2,000. And that was because of the outreach into the local communities. So we weren't just talking to our fan base, we were also talking to other people locally who might, you know, they may or may not actually be Charlton fans, but if they are living within 5 miles of this stadium, we want them to feel that the Valley is their home. We want them to feel that Charlton is their club. It is their club. And really, I think we've got a long process of engagement and of honest conversation with our local communities to really engender that sense of belonging. Many of our players come from those communities, and that's a fact. And that's a wonderful thing that we really need to then move on to the next level and get a more sort of diverse and a larger local fan base attending our matches. Because if we can do that, then there'll be no stopping this place. This place could be absolutely huge.
The club's supporters have been so vital throughout the club's history. How important will they be in this journey moving forwards?
I never like telling people what to do with their time or telling people what to do with their money. You know, when you go through 2 months of watching losing League One football, it's not my position to tell people that they should be turning up, because in their shoes, maybe I wouldn't either. I hope that as fans see the shape of what's happening here and their ability to engage and input into what's happening here, that they will start to feel that actually it's their journey, it's not our journey. It's their journey, and it's the players' journey, and it's the manager's journey, and this is a journey that can all be shared together. But, you know, ultimately, as I said when we came in the first place, you know, actions speak louder than words, and I can't sit here expecting people to turn up. I can point out how valuable it would be if they did turn up, and I think, you know, we have to accept that with, as people will notice in the news every week now, with an increasingly harsh financial sort of enforcement going on around the football industry in terms of what football clubs are and aren't allowed to spend, then of course the greater revenues that we have, the more we're able to spend on the footballing side of the club, which creates a better experience for the people who are coming. So there's a circularity to that. But at the end of the day, we have to be better. We have to produce better. We have to have a better fan experience. You know, over the summer we'll be putting in place a fan zone to make sure that it's not just about coming for 90 minutes, it's a broader experience than that. We're looking at improving the family offering. We're looking at improving the food offering. There's a lot of stuff that we need to do to make Charlton the best it possibly can be before we're ever in a position to tell other people what they should do with their time and money. But yes, of course, the more people who sign up for season tickets, the more people who come to the Valley, the more powerful this club is going to be. Of course, that's true.
Charlie, what you've said there reminds me of many conversations I've had with manager Nathan Jones. Just how important is it that there's that universal understanding amongst the team, and particularly led by people like Nathan?
Leadership's important. Leadership is important. It's a fact. And I think that one cannot ignore the level of leadership that Nathan Jones has brought to the club since he's been here. You know, he was obviously the first choice of the technical team to become manager in January. What I think some people don't know is he was the first choice of the technical team to become manager in September. I think one of the reasons why that approach was made was a perception that Charlton was a club that needed leadership, not just in the manager's office, but very much in the manager's office, but also throughout the entire organisation. It needs personality. It needs leadership, and that's something certainly that the manager has brought to the club. I think anyone can see that.
Nathan has spearheaded this really good unbeaten run that we're on at the time of recording. And as we head towards the end of the season, how much are you hoping that we can use this as a springboard for the summer, but importantly, starting next season in a better way than we did the last?
I think that most fans, of which I count myself as being one, understand what tends to lead up to a promotion season. It tends to be a settled status behind the scenes. It tends to be not too big an overhaul in the summer directly preceding the season. It tends to be the transfer business being done early so that the pre-season can bring the whole squad together. it tends to be a fit and robust squad who already look like round pegs in round holes. I mean, this is, I think most fans know that. Most fans have been through promotion seasons with their clubs. I have. I've watched it at Oxford. I've been part of it at Sunderland. And they kind of know what it looks like. So I think that the last couple of months, I believe, have been very valuable in that sort of preparation ground for what hopefully will be a promotion season next year.
I know that the season tickets recently went on sale. I absolutely loved the campaign. I love the fact that it featured supporters as well as the first team. How are the sales going?
Sales going well. Sales are pretty much on track with what they were last season, which, I said, we can't take that for granted. The reality is that the club is in the bottom half of League One. And that's not a place that the club should be. It's not a place that we want the club to be. So given where the club is, I'm very respectful of the number of people who have already made that commitment. All I can say to those who haven't yet made that commitment is, I really hope you do. I really, really hope you do. I really hope you can see what Nathan's doing. You can see what the rest of the management team is doing. And to a degree, hopefully, you can see that we are respectful, responsible custodians of your club and can see it as something which you can get behind. And you feel like that's a bus that you can get on board with. As we move towards putting together the advisory board, that it's something which you'll also be able to input into the running of the club as well, which is something that's very important. So, yeah, look, I mean, I'm not going to spend half an hour here trying to force people to buy season tickets because I can't do that. I can outline what I think the direction of the club is, I can outline what I think the potential of the club is, and I can outline the impact of the support of fans can have to the project as a whole. But after that, it's over to you.
Well, before we hand over to the supporters, what would be your final message to the Charlton faithful?
Just thank you. Thank you for sticking with it this season. I think that given some of the patches we've been through, I think the support has been absolutely remarkable for the team. There are fan bases I have known who would not have stuck with the team during games in the way in which the Charlton fan base has stuck with them. I thank them for giving us a hearing as an ownership group. We haven't come in and made big promises, and that, it's obviously, if we have made big promises, sometimes it's easy to get behind that. We decided not to do that, and there's been an honest discussion, an honest conversation with a lot of fans about the club, etc. So I thank them for that, and I think I also thank them just for their honesty. That honesty is an underrated virtue, and it can sometimes get people into trouble. I think we've got a manager who is extremely honest, and sometimes to a fault. In my own case, I'm honest, and sometimes to a fault. But that is probably also true of the Charlton fans. And I think I've just been absolutely, knocked over by the sheer level of expertise in our fan base. People really know stuff, not just about football, but about a whole variety of other things that have been hugely valuable for us. So yeah, there's an awful lot to be grateful for. And hopefully we can all move forward together and really just drive this great club onwards and upwards.
Charlie, thank you so much for your time and all the best for a busy summer ahead.
Thanks a lot, Charlotte. Cheers.